All this time, he knew I didn't do anything wrong. Marcus Chen was working for Meridian. The fire was industrial espionage gone wrong. You've been carrying guilt for 12 years over something that was never your fault. Noah set the letter down and stared at his hands, the scarred hands that still bore faint marks from that terrible night. Do you know what it's like to have everyone believe you're capable of destroying your own life for money? To have your wife look at you like she doesn't recognize the man she married? No, Ilara said honestly. But I know what it's like to carry someone else's expectations, to feel responsible for things that were never yours to control. Your father could have cleared my name. Yes. He chose not to. Yes. The word came out harder than she intended. He made a terrible mistake. And he knew it. He spent the rest of his life trying to figure out how to make it right. But he never did. He ran out of time. They sat in silence while a waitress refilled coffee cups, and somewhere in the kitchen, someone dropped a pan with a metallic crash that echoed like a gunshot. Why are you showing me this? Noah asked finally. Because you deserve to know the truth. Because my father's mistakes don't define your worth. And because I'm hoping you'll let me try to fix what he broke. Noah looked at the envelope of money. Enough to change his and Luna's life overnight. I don't want charity. It's not charity. It's payment for work you did, plus compensation for 12 years of lost income and damaged reputation. Legally and morally, it's yours. And the job offer still stands. Not because I feel guilty, but because you're the best horologist in the city, and this company needs someone who understands what craftsmanship actually means. Noah picked up one of the police reports, studying the details he had never been allowed to see. The truth, printed in black and white, felt both liberating and overwhelming. I need time, he said. Of course, and I need to think about Luna. She's been through enough disruption in her short life. She seems like a remarkable little girl. Noah's expression softened for the first time that evening. She is. She's the only thing I've done right in the past 12 years. Then maybe it's time to show her that her father is remarkable too. As they prepared to leave the diner, Ilara felt compelled to add one more thing. Noah, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. For the gala, for treating you like you were invisible, for perpetuating an injustice I was too self-absorbed to recognize. Noah studied her face, perhaps seeing her clearly for the first time since that humiliating night in the ballroom. You're not who I thought you were. Neither are you. They walked back to the building in comfortable silence. Two people who had spent years hiding from their true selves, beginning to consider the possibility that it might be safe to stop running. Over the following days, Noah found himself caught between two worlds. During his shifts, he moved through the building with the same quiet efficiency, but now the work felt different, temporary rather than permanent, a bridge rather than a destination. He researched Ilara's claims about his reputation, discovering that several prominent collectors still spoke of his work with respect and regret. The horological community, it seemed, had suspected all along that the accusations against him were unfounded. But no one had possessed the evidence to prove it. Most importantly, he talked to Luna. "Daddy," she said one evening as they shared takeout Chinese food at their small kitchen table, "you've been sad longer than usual lately." "Have I?" Noah tried to smile. But Luna had inherited too much of her mother's emotional intelligence to be fooled by surface gestures. The deep sad, not the regular sad about missing mommy or wishing we had a bigger apartment. The sad that makes you forget to laugh at my jokes. Noah set down his chopsticks and studied his daughter's earnest face. At 8, she already possessed wisdom that had taken him decades to recognize. "Someone offered me a different job," he said carefully. "A job doing the kind of work I used to do before you were born. Making beautiful things, Yes. And you're scared. It wasn't a question. Luna had lived through enough disappointments to recognize fear when she saw it, even when it was disguised as caution. A little, Noah admitted. What if you're really good at it again? The question caught him off guard. He had been so focused on the possibility of failure that he hadn't considered the alternative. What if I'm not? Then you'll figure something else out. You always do. Luna reached across the table and patted his hand with the matter-of-fact compassion of someone who had never doubted that love was stronger than circumstances. Besides, I think you should try. Mrs. Rodriguez says that scared feelings and excited feelings are exactly the same, except for what story you tell yourself about them. Noah smiled, a real smile this time. When did you get so wise? I learned from my dad. He's really smart, even when he forgets. That night, after Luna was asleep, Noah sat at their tiny kitchen table and composed a text to Ilara. I'd like to discuss the position. When would be convenient? Her response came within minutes. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. My office. And Noah? Thank you. For the first time in 12 years, Noah Blake fell asleep excited about the future. But even as Noah prepared to reclaim his identity as a craftsman, neither he nor Ilara could have predicted the crisis that would test both the company's stability and their growing trust in each other. It started with a power surge during a thunderstorm that knocked out the climate control system in the Heritage Vault, where Whitmore timepieces stored their most valuable vintage pieces and one-of-a-kind commissions. By the time the backup generators kicked in, the temperature had spiked 15 degrees and humidity levels had soared. The damage was immediate and potentially catastrophic. Dozens of antique movements had expanded beyond their tolerances, gears seizing, springs snapping, delicate components warping in ways that could take months or years to properly repair. Among the damaged pieces was the centerpiece of the collection, a one-of-a-kind astronomical clock commissioned by a Russian oligarch and valued at $3.7 million. Ilara stood in the vault at 6 a.m., surrounded by her senior staff and 2 consulting experts from Switzerland. The Swiss horologists examined the damaged pieces with grave expressions, shaking their heads and speaking in rapid German about replacement parts and extended timelines. How long? Ilara asked finally. 6 months minimum for the astronomical piece, said the lead consultant. Perhaps longer if we cannot source the specialty components. Some of these movements are entirely custom. The original craftsman who built them would need to recreate the damaged parts by hand. The original craftsman died in 1993. Then we have a problem. The insurance implications alone were staggering, but the real disaster was reputational. The astronomical clock was scheduled to be the centerpiece of an exhibition at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, opening in 3 weeks. Collectors and journalists from around the world had planned to attend. Canceling would signal weakness and incompetence in an industry where reputation was everything. Ilara dismissed the consultants and stood alone in the vault, surrounded by millions of dollars worth of damaged artistry. Each piece represented not just monetary value but centuries of human creativity and skill, her great-grandfather's original workshop designs, her grandfather's innovations in perpetual calendars, her father's pioneering work in minute repeaters, all of it potentially ruined because of a power surge and her failure to anticipate every possible contingency. She was still standing there when Noah arrived for his evening shift, pushing his cart of cleaning supplies down the hallway. He paused when he saw the vault door open and the lights on, recognizing immediately that something was wrong. "Miss Whitmore, is everything all right?" Ilara turned, and Noah was shocked to see tears on her face. In all his months of observing her from a distance, he had never seen her display any emotion stronger than mild irritation. "Climate control failure," she said, gesturing helplessly at the damaged timepieces. 43 pieces affected, including the Volkov astronomical clock. The Swiss experts say it could take 6 months to repair. if it can be repaired at all. Noah set down his supplies and stepped into the vault. His eyes immediately drawn to the astronomical clock. It was a masterpiece of mechanical engineering. A table-sized mechanism that tracked lunar phases, planetary movements, and seasonal changes through an intricate dance of gears and rotating displays. Even damaged, it was breathtaking. "May I?" he asked, moving toward the clock. Elara nodded, too exhausted to question why her janitor was asking to examine a multi-million-dollar timepiece. Noah's hands hovered over the mechanism, not touching but studying the damage with the focused intensity of a surgeon examining an injury. His eyes traced the gear trains, identified the seized components, cataloged the warped elements that would need replacement. "The main spring barrel is intact," he murmured, more to himself than to Elara. "Temperature expansion seized the planetary gear train here and here. The lunar phase indicator is binding against the calendar wheel." He paused, leaning closer. "But the core movement is sound. The damage is primarily in the display mechanisms. You can see all that just by looking? I built something similar once. Not as complex, but the same principles." Noah straightened, his expression shifting from analysis to possibility. "This isn't irreparable. Difficult, yes, but not impossible. The Swiss experts are thinking like factory technicians. They want to replace entire assemblies because that's safer and more predictable. But this clock wasn't built in a factory. It was built by an artist who understood that every component serves multiple functions." Elara stared at him. "Are you saying you could fix it?" "I'm saying I could try. But I'd need access to a proper workshop, precision tools, and time to fabricate replacement parts by hand. And there's no guarantee." "How long?" 2 weeks. Maybe 3. The exhibition opens in 3 weeks. Then we'd better get started." What followed was the most intense 3 weeks of both their lives. Elara cleared out an unused conference room and had it converted into a temporary workshop, complete with precision lathes, microscopes, and every tool Noah requested. She canceled her other appointments and spent her days watching him work, learning the intricacies of mechanical timekeeping from someone who spoke the language fluently. Noah's hands, scarred but steady, coaxed life back into mechanisms that others had declared beyond salvation. He fabricated gears so small they could fit on a pinhead, adjusted tensions measured in fractions of millimeters, restored the poetry of mechanical motion to timepieces that had been silenced by heat and humidity. Luna spent her afternoons in the workshop, doing homework at a small table while her father worked. She asked intelligent questions about gear ratios and spring tensions, surprising Elara with her quick understanding of complex concepts. "Daddy's always been good at fixing broken things," Luna explained one day when Elara commented on Noah's seemingly impossible progress. "He fixed my music box when I was little, and Mrs. Rodriguez's kitchen clock, and Mr. Peterson's old watch that his grandfather gave him. He never told me he was still doing repair work. He doesn't like to talk about it. He says it makes him remember too much. But he can't help himself when something beautiful is broken." As the days passed, Elara found herself looking forward to her time in the workshop. There was something hypnotic about watching Noah work, seeing the way his entire being focused on the delicate mechanisms before him. He moved with a precision that reminded her of her father, but with a gentleness that was entirely his own. More than that, she found herself talking to him, really talking, not the careful corporate communication she used with everyone else. They discussed the history of various timepieces, the philosophy of craftsmanship, the way mechanical objects could embody human values like patience, precision, and permanence. "Your father understood something that most people in this industry have forgotten," Noah said one evening, as he adjusted the planetary display on the astronomical clock. "A watch isn't just a machine that tells time. It's a promise that some things are worth preserving, that human skill and dedication can create beauty that outlasts the person who made it." Is that why you kept working on timepieces, even after everything that happened? I tried to stop. For years, I avoided anything that reminded me of who I used to be. But Luna's music box broke when she was 5, and she cried like her heart was breaking. I couldn't stand to see her sadness over something I knew I could fix. So you fixed it. I fixed it. And then Mrs. Rodriguez's clock, and Mr. Peterson's watch, and a dozen other things that found their way to me. Word gets around in a neighborhood when someone can bring broken things back to life. Why didn't you try to rebuild your business? Noah paused in his work, considering the question. Fear. Mostly. Fear of failing again. Of having people look at me the way they did after the fire. But also because I thought maybe this was enough helping neighbors, fixing small things, staying invisible. And now? Now I'm wondering if staying invisible was just another way of staying broken. On the 18th day, with 3 days left before the exhibition opening, Noah completed the final calibration of the astronomical clock. The mechanism hummed to life with perfect precision, its multiple displays tracking celestial movements with accuracy that would remain true for centuries. Ilara stood beside him, watching the clock's mesmerizing dance of gears and indicators. But her attention was focused on the man who had accomplished what experts said was impossible. Noah, she said quietly, I owe you more than I can ever repay. You don't owe me anything. You gave me back my name, my reputation, my sense of who I used to be. This was just me returning the favor. No. It was more than that. You saved the company, the exhibition, everything my family built. But more than that, you showed me what real craftsmanship looks like, what dedication and passion can accomplish when they're properly supported. She turned to face him fully. I want you to stay, not just as head of restoration, but as a partner. I want to rebuild this company around the values you represent: artistry over efficiency, quality over quantity, human skill over mass production. Noah looked around the workshop they had created together, at the timepieces he had restored, at Luna sleeping peacefully in a chair with her homework scattered around her. For the first time in 12 years, he could envision a future that looked like the dreams he had carried as a young man. I'd like that, he said simply. The Metropolitan Museum exhibition was hailed as a triumph, with the restored astronomical clock drawing crowds and critical acclaim. But for Ilara and Noah, the real victory was quieter and more personal, the knowledge that they had found in each other something they hadn't even known they were looking for. 3 months later, Ilara stood on the stage of the Grand Ballroom at the Plaza Hotel, addressing an audience of collectors, journalists, and industry leaders gathered for the annual American Watchmaking Awards ceremony. The same type of crowd that had witnessed her humiliation at the charity gala, but everything was different now. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice steady and confident. Tonight, I want to talk to you about recognition, about the difference between visibility and value, between reputation and worth. She paused, scanning the crowd, until she found Noah sitting at a table near the back, wearing a well-tailored suit instead of coveralls, but still somehow managing to look like he would rather be anywhere else. 6 months ago, I made a statement that I deeply regret. I suggested that someone's job title determined their worth as a human being. I was wrong, and my words caused pain to someone who deserved only respect and recognition. A murmur went through the crowd as people began to understand where she was heading. Tonight, I want to introduce you to Noah Blake, our new Director of Heritage Restoration. Some of you may remember Noah from his earlier work in the industry. Some of you may have heard the false accusations that drove him from the profession he loved. All of you should know that Noah Blake is the finest horologist of his generation, a man who can coax life from mechanisms others consider beyond repair. She gestured toward Noah, who reluctantly stood as applause filled the room. But more than his technical skill, Noah Blake represents something this industry needs desperately: the understanding that our work is about more than profit margins and production quotas. It's about preserving human artistry, about creating objects that will outlast our own brief time on this earth, about the miracle of mechanical precision in an increasingly digital world. The applause grew stronger, and Noah felt something he hadn't experienced in over a decade. The respect of his peers, freely given and genuinely meant. "Noah, would you join me up here?" He shook his head slightly. But Luna, who was sitting beside him in her best dress with her hair carefully braided, leaned over and whispered something that made him smile. He stood and walked to the stage, his steps growing more confident as he approached. "I'd like Noah to tell you about our new heritage initiative," Alara continued. "A program that will train the next generation of craftsmen and women in traditional techniques while providing living wages and full benefits. Because talent shouldn't be wasted due to circumstances, and passion shouldn't be sacrificed to economics." Noah took the microphone, looking out at faces that had once turned away from him in suspicion and contempt. But now he saw curiosity, interest, and in many cases, genuine warmth. "My daughter Luna asked me a question recently," he began, his voice growing stronger with each word. "She wanted to know why I stopped making beautiful things. I told her it was because I was afraid. Afraid of failing. Afraid of being hurt again. Afraid of hoping for something better." He found Luna's face in the crowd, her smile giving him courage to continue. "But she said something that changed my perspective. She said that scared feelings and excited feelings are exactly the same, except for the story you tell yourself about them. Tonight, I'm choosing to tell myself a different story." The audience was completely silent, hanging on his words. "The story I'm choosing is about second chances, about communities that support their artists, about the value of work that serves beauty rather than just profit. It's about companies like Whitmore Timepieces that understand that the best investment you can make is in human potential." He handed the microphone back to Alara, but before stepping away, he said one more thing that carried clearly through the room without amplification. "And it's about the courage to admit when you're wrong, and the grace to help others become who they were meant to be." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, but Noah barely heard it. He was looking at Luna, who was clapping so hard her hands must have hurt, her face glowing with pride that made all the years of struggle worthwhile. Later, as the formal reception wound down, Noah found himself on the hotel's terrace, looking out over Central Park. The city sprawled beneath him, millions of lights marking millions of stories, each one precious and unique. "Hiding from your own party?" Alara's voice came from behind him. He turned to find her silhouetted against the ballroom lights, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "Just thinking," he said, accepting the glass. "A year ago, I was mopping floors and telling myself it was enough. Tonight, I gave a speech to the most influential people in our industry. Regrets? Number just. Amazed at how quickly life can change when you stop running from it." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the park's darkness punctuated by streetlights and the distant glow of apartment windows. "Noah," Alara said eventually, "can I ask you something personal?" "Sure. Do you think you could ever trust someone enough to let them be part of your and Luna's life? Not as an employer or a colleague, but as something more?" He turned to study her face, seeing vulnerability there that matched his own. "Are we still talking hypothetically?" "I don't think we've been talking hypothetically for months." Noah set down his champagne glass and moved closer to her, close enough to see the way the city lights reflected in her eyes. "I never thought I'd find someone who understood both sides of who I am, the craftsman and the father, the dreamer and the realist. Someone who could see past the uniforms I've worn to the person underneath. And I think I'd be a fool not to try." When he kissed her, it felt like the first honest thing he had done in years. Not desperate or needy, but steady and sure, like the ticking of a well-made watch marking moments that mattered. 1 year later, on a Saturday afternoon in late spring, Noah and Luna stood in the main showroom of Whitmore Timepieces, putting finishing touches on a display that would open to the public the following Monday. The Heritage Collection, as it had come to be known, featured restored vintage pieces alongside new creations that honored traditional techniques while incorporating modern innovations. Luna, now 9, and even more confident than her father remembered being at that age, carefully adjusted the position of a pocket watch that Noah had created specifically for the collection. The case was engraved with her initials, a birthday gift that had made her cry with happiness. "Perfect," Noah said, stepping back to admire her work. "You have a good eye for display. I learned from watching you and Alara. She says presentation is just as important as craftsmanship because people need to understand why something is beautiful before they can appreciate it." She's right. She's right about a lot of things. That's probably why you fell in love with her. Noah nearly dropped the watch he was holding. "Dad, I'm 9. Not blind. You get that same look on your face when you're working on a really complicated mechanism and when you're talking to Alara, like you're solving a puzzle that makes perfect sense once you understand how all the pieces fit together." Sometimes his daughter's perceptiveness still caught him off guard. "How do you feel about that?" Luna considered the question with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. "I think she makes you happy in a way that's different from how I make you happy. Like, I make you proud and loving and protective, but she makes you more yourself. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense." "Good. Because I already asked her if I could call her mom when you guys get married, and she cried happy tears and said yes." "When we get married?" "Dad, seriously, you carry a ring box in your jacket pocket, and you've been practicing proposals in the bathroom mirror. I can hear you through the wall." Noah laughed, pulling his daughter into a hug that lifted her off her feet. "Have I mentioned lately that you're too smart for your own good? Every day. But you say it in a proud voice. So I know you don't really mean it." As they finished arranging the display, Alara emerged from her office wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual business attire. Saturday work sessions had become a tradition for the three of them, a time when they could work together without the pressures of meetings and deadlines. "How does it look?" she asked, studying the collection with the critical eye she brought to everything involving the company's reputation. "Perfect," Luna announced. "Dad and I make a good team." "Yes, you do." Alara moved to stand beside Noah, and he automatically put his arm around her shoulders, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Are you ready for the unveiling Monday?" "As ready as we'll ever be," Noah said. "Though I still can't quite believe that my name will be on the placard next to yours." "Believe it." Master Horologist Noah Blake, Director of Heritage Restoration, Whitmore Timepieces. "It has a nice ring to it." "Speaking of rings," Luna said with the subtle delivery of someone who had clearly inherited her father's sense of timing, "I'm going to go get a soda from the break room and take a very long time doing it." She skipped away, leaving Noah and Alara alone among the timepieces that represented their shared commitment to preserving beauty and craftsmanship. "She knows," Noah said. "Of course she knows. She's your daughter. And I love her almost as much as I love you. Which is saying something. Because I love you more than I thought was possible." Noah reached into his jacket pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box that contained a ring he had designed, and crafted himself a simple platinum band set with a small diamond, elegant and timeless rather than ostentatious. "Alara Whitmore," he said, dropping to one knee among the displays of mechanical artistry that had brought them together. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? And, more importantly, would you like to help Luna and me build a family that's as carefully crafted and precisely calibrated as the finest timepiece?" Alara's answer came through tears of joy that she didn't bother to hide. "Yes, To all of it. Yes. As Noah slipped the ring onto her finger, Luna's voice carried from the break room. It's about time. And somewhere in the building, surrounded by the gentle ticking of hundreds of timepieces, each marking moments that would become memories, three people who had found each other against all odds began planning a future that would honor the past, while embracing the possibility that the best was yet to come. The wedding was small and perfect, held in the showroom of Whitmore Timepieces on a Sunday afternoon, when the light streaming through the windows made everything look golden. Luna served as maid of honor, wearing a dress the color of spring leaves and carrying a bouquet of white roses. She had insisted on writing her own speech, which made every adult in attendance cry, and reminded everyone present that sometimes the most profound wisdom comes from the youngest hearts. My dad always told me that broken things can be fixed if you have the right tools and enough patience, she said, standing confidently at the microphone. But I think what he really learned is that sometimes broken people can fix each other, and that's even better than fixing watches. Now, 6 months later, they were a family in every sense that mattered. Noah and Alara had moved into a house in Brooklyn with a workshop in the garage where Noah could pursue personal projects, and a garden where Luna could grow the flowers she had become passionate about cultivating. The Heritage Initiative had exceeded all expectations, training 12 apprentices in its first year, and establishing Whitmore Timepieces as the premier destination for collectors who valued artistry over mass production. Orders were backlogged for 18 months, but neither Noah nor Alara minded. Quality took time, and time was the one thing they had learned to value above all else. On this particular Saturday, they were at the workshop putting finishing touches on a commission that had special meaning for all of them, a memorial timepiece for Luna's elementary school, honoring teachers who had dedicated their careers to nurturing young minds. Luna had suggested the project, and Noah had designed a clock that would tick steadily in the school's main hallway, reminding students and faculty that every moment spent learning was a moment invested in the future. There, Noah said, making a final adjustment to the pendulum mechanism. Perfect accuracy. This clock will keep time for the next 100 years. Longer, Luna corrected, polishing the brass case with the careful attention her father had taught her. You build things to last forever. Nothing lasts forever, sweetheart. The important things do. Love lasts forever. Good memories last forever. The feeling you get when you make something beautiful that lasts forever too. Alara looked up from the dedication plaque she was engraving, struck once again by the wisdom that seemed to flow naturally from this remarkable child who had taught two adults how to believe in second chances. You know what, Luna? She said. I think you're absolutely right. Outside, the Brooklyn afternoon was fading into evening, but inside the workshop, surrounded by the people they loved and the work that gave their lives meaning, time felt infinite and precious, each tick of each clock, marking moments of contentment that would indeed last forever in the careful chambers of memory. And somewhere in the distance, barely audible above the gentle symphony of mechanical timepieces, was the sound of three hearts, beating in perfect synchronization, keeping time with a love that had been broken and repaired, lost and found, tested and proven strong enough to last through all the years to come. The crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the ballroom as camera flashes erupted like fireworks. Alara Whitmore stood frozen at the podium, her champagne glass trembling slightly in her manicured hand. The reporter's question hung in the air like smoke from a dying cigarette. Is it true you're dating a janitor? Heat flooded her cheeks. Without thinking, her finger pointed toward the back of the room, where a figure in navy blue coveralls was quietly mopping the marble floor. I would never date a janitor, she declared, her voice carrying further than intended. The man stopped mid-motion, his eyes meeting hers across the crowded room with an expression she would never forget. Alara Whitmore had built her empire on precision. At 35, she commanded Whitmore Timepieces with the same exacting standards her father had instilled in her before his sudden death 5 years ago. Every morning at 6 sharp, she arrived at the gleaming headquarters overlooking Manhattan's Diamond District. Her office walls displayed awards and photographs of her shaking hands with world leaders, each frame positioned at mathematically perfect angles. The company's legacy stretched back 4 generations, but the weight of carrying it forward rested solely on her shoulders. She had learned early that emotions were luxury items she couldn't afford. When her father collapsed in his workshop at 58, clutching his chest while examining a prototype movement, Ilara had been 29 and working in marketing. The board of directors had questioned whether a woman could lead the company. Competitors circled like vultures, sensing weakness. Employees whispered about selling to larger corporations. In response, Ilara had crystallized into something harder than the sapphire crystal protecting their watch faces. Her days followed rigid patterns. Board meetings where she spoke in measured tones about market penetration and profit margins. Client dinners where she smiled at precisely the right moments while discussing Swiss complications and limited editions. Charity galas where she wrote checks for causes she barely had time to understand. She lived in a penthouse apartment filled with museum-quality furniture that remained pristine because she was never home long enough to disturb it. Men approached her regularly, drawn by her success, her beauty, or her bank account. Investment bankers with practiced charm, politicians with calculated smiles, CEOs from other companies seeking strategic alliances through marriage. She dated some of them. Relationships that felt like business negotiations conducted over expensive wine. None had ever seen her cry. None had ever heard her laugh without calculation behind it. None had ever touched the part of her that remembered being 8 years old, sitting on her father's lap while he explained how tiny gears could measure the infinite mystery of time. Meanwhile, 38 floors below, Noah Blake was finishing his shift in a world Ilara never noticed. He moved through the building like a ghost, arriving after the executives had gone home to their suburban mansions and their second wives. His territory included the executive floors, the workshops, and the public showrooms where million-dollar timepieces sat behind bulletproof glass. Noah had not always been invisible. 12 years ago, he had been Noah Blake, master horologist, the youngest craftsman ever admitted to the American Watchmaking Institute. His hands could coax life from the most delicate mechanisms. His workshop in Brooklyn had been small but renowned among collectors who valued artistry over mass production. He had been married to Sarah, a music teacher with gentle eyes and a laugh that made their cramped apartment feel like a palace. Then came the fire. A short circuit in aging wiring had ignited the building at 2 in the morning. Noah had managed to save Mrs. Chen from the apartment next door, carrying the elderly woman down 3 flights of smoke-filled stairs. But he couldn't save his workshop, his tools, his reputation, or his marriage. Sarah had tried to stand by him through the lawsuits and the insurance investigations, but watching him become someone she didn't recognize had slowly broken her spirit. The divorce papers had arrived on the same day Luna took her first steps. Noah had signed them without contest, understanding that Sarah deserved better than the hollow man he had become. But he had fought for joint custody of Luna with everything he had left, which wasn't much. The legal fees had consumed his savings. The stress had consumed his health. Depression had consumed his soul. The janitorial job had been a lifeline thrown by a friend of a friend who remembered Noah from better days. Night shift paid a premium, and the work was honest. More importantly, it allowed him to spend afternoons with Luna when she came home from school. He would pick her up at 3:30, help her with homework at the kitchen table of their studio apartment, make dinner from whatever was on sale at the grocery store, and tuck her into bed with stories about brave princesses and kind dragons before leaving for work at 10 p.m. Luna was 8 now, with Sarah's gentle eyes and Noah's stubborn chin. She never complained about their circumstances, never asked why other children had bigger homes or newer clothes. She made friendship bracelets from scraps of yarn, and left them on Noah's pillow with notes that said, "Best daddy ever," in her careful cursive handwriting. When Noah came home exhausted at dawn, she would already be awake, making him toast with peanut butter cut into heart shapes. The night of the charity gala, Noah had been working later than usual. A wine spill in the executive dining room had required deep cleaning, and he wanted to finish before the morning staff arrived. He had been focused on removing red stains from imported marble when the sound of his name being discussed made him look up. The aftermath of Ilara's public declaration spread through the building like ripples in still water. By morning, everyone knew. The security guards smirked when he passed. The day-shift cleaning crew avoided eye contact. The executive assistants who had previously ignored him now watched him with a mixture of pity and embarrassment that felt worse than contempt. But Noah said nothing. He had learned years ago that defending himself only made things worse. He simply continued his work, disappearing into the rhythm of routine that had kept him sane through darker times. Mop. Rinse. Repeat. Check the supply closets. Empty the trash cans. Polish the brass fixtures until they gleamed like mirrors reflecting a life he used to live. After the humiliation of the charity gala, Ilara tried to push the incident from her mind, but the memory clung to her like smoke. She found herself taking different routes through the building to avoid encountering the man she had so thoughtlessly humiliated. When board meetings ran late and she caught glimpses of navy coveralls in the hallway, she felt an unfamiliar sensation in her chest that she couldn't quite name. 3 days after the gala, she was leaving her office near midnight when she noticed something glinting on the marble floor near the elevators. Her father's pocket watch lay where it had fallen from her purse, its gold case scratched from the impact. She had carried it everywhere since his death, though it had stopped working years ago. The watch repair shops she had visited all said the same thing. The mechanism was too old, too damaged. Parts no longer existed. Ilara picked up the watch and held it to her ear out of habit, hearing only silence. The inscription on the back had worn smooth from years of her father's fingers tracing the words, "Time heals all wounds, M.W." Her grandfather had given it to her father on his wedding day. Her father had planned to give it to her future husband someday, but someday had become never when his heart stopped beating. She slipped the watch back into her purse and headed home to her sterile penthouse, where she poured herself a glass of wine she wouldn't finish and stared out at the city lights until exhaustion finally pulled her towards sleep. The next morning, the watch was ticking. Ilara stared at it in disbelief, holding it to her ear to confirm the steady rhythm she hadn't heard in 5 years. The crystal face was clear, the hands moving with perfect precision. She opened the case and found everything exactly as it should be, except for a tiny engraving on the inside cover that hadn't been there before. Still ticking. N. Her hands trembled as she set the watch on her desk. Someone had taken it, repaired it, and returned it without a word. Someone with extraordinary skill and access to her office. Someone whose initial was N. The security footage told the story. At 2:17 a.m., a figure in navy coveralls had knelt beside the elevators, carefully picking up something from the floor. At 5:43 a.m., the same figure had entered her office with a master key, placed something on her desk, and left as quietly as a shadow. Noah Blake, the man she had publicly declared she would never date, had spent hours of his own time fixing the one thing in her life that couldn't be bought or replaced. The watch her father had treasured, the last connection to a man who had taught her that precision and patience could capture eternity in a mechanism small enough to fit in your palm. Ilara called the head of security and requested Noah's personnel file. The sparse document revealed little. Hired 3 years ago. Excellent performance reviews. No disciplinary actions. Under emergency contacts, there was only one name. Luna Blake. Daughter. Age 8. That afternoon, she found herself studying the building's employee database. searching for more information about the man who had restored her father's most precious possession. The deeper she dug, the more questions arose. Why was someone capable of such delicate work pushing a mop? What had brought him to this building, to this life that seemed so far beneath his abilities? For the first time in years, Ilara found herself genuinely curious about another person's story. The sensation was unsettling and addictive, like the first sip of wine after months of sobriety. She caught herself looking toward the hallways during evening meetings, hoping to catch a glimpse of navy coveralls. When she worked late, she listened for the soft sounds of footsteps and the gentle swoosh of a mop against marble. The watch ticked steadily on her wrist, marking moments she had never noticed before. Each second felt different now, weighted with possibility and questions she didn't know how to ask. Ilara began working later, telling herself it was dedication to quarterly reports and strategic planning. But truthfully, she was hoping to encounter Noah Blake again, to see the man behind the careful gesture that had restored something she thought was lost forever. The opportunity came on a Thursday evening when she emerged from a conference call with Tokyo investors to find Noah polishing the brass handrails outside her office. He looked up when she approached, his expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Blake," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." He straightened, setting down his cloth. "Ma'am?" She held up her wrist, showing him the watch. "Though I suppose it works better now than it ever did when it was truly mine." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The building hummed quietly around them, fluorescent lights casting stark shadows on polished surfaces. Noah's eyes were the color of slate before a storm, and she found herself noticing details she had missed during their brief, humiliating encounter at the gala. The way his work shirt was always perfectly clean despite the nature of his job. The careful precision of his movements. The fact that his hands, though calloused, moved with the grace of someone who had once worked with delicate things. "I'm sorry about taking it," he said finally. "I saw it fall and recognized the maker's mark. 1890 vintage Whitmore movement. One of your great-grandfather's pieces. I couldn't leave it broken." "How did you know what it was?" "I used to work with timepieces." The answer came carefully, like he was revealing a secret he rarely shared. "A long time ago." "What happened?" Noah glanced toward the elevator, clearly wanting to escape this conversation. But something in her tone must have convinced him she was asking out of genuine interest rather than idle curiosity. "Life happened," he said. "Sometimes things break, and you can't fix them. Sometimes you have to start over in a different direction." Ilara nodded, understanding more than he probably realized. She had built her entire existence around the fear of things breaking, of having to start over. But here was a man who had done exactly that and somehow survived. "Thank you," she said, meaning more than just the watch repair. "It means more to me than you could know." "Your father was a good man," Noah said quietly. "He didn't deserve to go so young." The words hit her like a physical blow. "You knew my father?" But Noah was already walking away, his footsteps echoing down the empty corridor. Ilara stood frozen, watching him disappear around the corner, her father's watch ticking steadily against her wrist, like a heartbeat she had forgotten she possessed. That night, she sat in her office long after Noah's shift had ended, staring at old photographs of her father. In several pictures from industry events, she noticed a young man standing slightly behind him, listening intently as her father explained various mechanisms to potential clients. The young man had thick, dark hair and intense eyes that seemed familiar. She pulled out a magnifying glass and studied the photos more closely. There, barely visible on the young man's shirt, was a name tag. Noah Blake. Apprentice. The realization struck her like lightning. Noah hadn't just known her father, he had worked for him. He had been part of the Whitmore legacy before everything fell apart, before he became invisible. Over the following days, Elara found herself paying attention to Noah in ways she had never noticed anyone before. She observed how he interacted with other employees, always polite but maintaining careful distance. She watched him work, noting the methodical way he approached each task, the pride he took in details others would never notice. On Friday afternoon, she made a decision that surprised even herself. She left her office early and drove to PS 107, where, according to Noah's file, Luna Blake was a third-grade student. The school was a typical Manhattan elementary building, brick and concrete, surrounded by a small playground. At 3:30, children poured out of the doors like colorful confetti, running toward waiting parents and caregivers. Luna Blake was easy to spot. She had her father's dark hair and the same careful way of observing her surroundings before moving. But where Noah seemed to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders, Luna moved with the light step of someone who still believed in magic. She waited on the front steps, a pink backpack covered in star stickers at her feet, reading a book that looked far too advanced for a third grader. When Noah arrived, jogging slightly because he was a few minutes late, Luna's face transformed into pure sunshine. "Daddy." She launched herself into his arms with the complete trust of a child who had never doubted she was loved. "Sorry, sweetheart." The train was delayed. Noah hugged her tightly, and Elara saw something in his expression she had never witnessed in the corporate world. Unconditional love without agenda or calculation. "It's okay. I finished my math homework while I waited. Want to see?" Luna pulled out a worksheet covered in neat numbers and careful writing. "You're brilliant," Noah said, studying the paper as if it contained the secrets of the universe. "But you know what? I think this answer here might need another look." They sat on the steps together, Luna's head bent close to her father's, as he gently guided her through the problem. Watching them, Elara felt something crack open in her chest, a longing so sharp it took her breath away. This was what she had been missing all these years while building her empire. This connection, this simplicity, this love that didn't need contracts or negotiations or strategic planning. It just existed, pure and uncomplicated, like the steady ticking of a well-made watch. As Noah and Luna walked hand in hand toward the subway station, Luna skipping slightly to match her father's longer stride, Elara realized she was crying. Not the calculated tears she had shed at her father's funeral, performed for the cameras and the board members who were watching for signs of weakness. These were real tears, salt water carrying years of buried longing. She sat in her expensive car, watching the ordinary miracle of a father and daughter who had found joy despite having lost everything else, and wondered if she had spent her entire adult life optimizing for the wrong variables. The following Monday, Elara did something unprecedented. She left a note on her assistant's desk, requesting that Noah Blake be asked to come to her office at his earliest convenience. The request went through proper channels, causing curious looks and whispered conversations throughout the building. When Noah appeared at her door that evening, still wearing his work uniform, Elara realized she had no idea how to begin the conversation she needed to have. "Please, sit down," she said, gesturing to the leather chair across from her desk. Noah remained standing. "Is there a problem with my work, ma'am?" No. Your work is exemplary. I wanted to talk to you about something else." She took a breath, steadying herself. "I know you worked for my father." For a moment, Noah's carefully composed expression flickered, revealing surprise and something that might have been pain. Then the mask slipped back into place. "That was a long time ago. Tell me about it." It wasn't a request. Noah glanced toward the door, clearly calculating escape routes. But something in Elara's voice, perhaps the fact that she was asking rather than demanding, made him reconsider. "I was 26, he said finally, fresh out of horological school, full of ideas about craftsmanship and artistry. Your father took a chance on a kid from Brooklyn who thought he could change the world one gear at a time. What did you do for him? Started in repair. Moved up to restoration of vintage pieces. Eventually, he let me work on some custom commissions. Noah's voice grew softer. Remembering, he was patient with me, even when I made mistakes. Said I had good hands and a better heart. Then what happened? Life happened. The words came out harder than Noah had intended. I left to start my own business. Got married. Had dreams of building something that would last. He paused, struggling with memories he rarely allowed himself to revisit. The fire took everything. My workshop, my tools, my reputation. The insurance company fought the claim. Lawyers got involved. Your father tried to help. Offered me my old job back. But I was too proud, too angry, too broken. Alara leaned forward, studying his face. He talked about you, you know. After you left, he said you were the most talented craftsman he'd ever trained. He was kind. My father wasn't kind. He was honest. The words carried weight, and Noah looked up to meet her eyes for the first time since entering the office. If he said you were talented, it was because you were. Talent doesn't pay rent or buy groceries for an 8-year-old girl. But it fixed my father's watch. They sat in silence for a moment, the steady ticking of various timepieces around the office marking seconds that felt pregnant with possibility. "Why are you asking me this?" Noah said finally. Alara stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. Far below, people moved like ants along sidewalks, each carrying their own stories of triumph and failure, love and loss. Because I've spent 5 years thinking I knew everything about running this company, about carrying on my father's legacy. But I realize I don't know anything about the people who make it possible. I don't know their stories or their dreams or what they've lost along the way. She turned back to face him. And because you gave me back something I thought was gone forever, not just the watch, the memory of my father's voice, telling me that time heals all wounds. I had forgotten that some things are worth waiting for. Noah stood, uncomfortable with the intimacy of the conversation. I should get back to work. Should you? Or do you think there might be another way? Ma'am, I'm offering you a job, Mr. Blake. Not as a janitor, but as what you are. A master horologist, head of our restoration department. Full benefits, salary commensurate with your skills, and flexible hours, so you can still pick up Luna from school. Noah stared at her as if she had spoken in a foreign language. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. The board would never approve. I am the board. This is my company, and I make the decisions about who works here and in what capacity. Alara moved closer, her voice gaining strength. The question is, are you ready to stop hiding from who you used to be? The question hung between them like a bridge. Noah wasn't sure he was ready to cross. For 3 years, he had found safety in invisibility, in work that required nothing more than showing up and following instructions. The thought of creating again, of risking failure and judgment, terrified him more than poverty ever had. But as he looked at Alara Whitmore really looked at her, he saw something he recognized. The same fear he carried, hidden behind expensive clothes and corporate success instead of janitor's coveralls and careful silence. I need to think about it, he said. Of course. Take all the time you need. As Noah left her office, Alara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Hope. Not the calculated optimism she brought to board meetings and investor calls, but real hope, fragile and precious as a watch movement, ticking with the rhythm of second chances. But Alara's research into Noah's past had only scratched the surface. Driven by a curiosity she couldn't name, she spent the following week making phone calls and reviewing old files, piecing together the full story of what had happened to her father's most promising apprentice. The truth, when she finally uncovered it, was more complex and heartbreaking than she had imagined. Noah hadn't simply left to start his own business. He had been recruited by Meridian Watch Company, Whitmore's biggest competitor, with an offer that included a signing bonus large enough to pay for his wedding and a down payment on a small workshop. The move had been seen as a betrayal by some in the industry, though her father had publicly wished him well. But the fire that destroyed Noah's workshop hadn't been an accident. According to a police report Alara had to pull strings to access, investigators had found evidence of arson. The primary suspect had been Marcus Chen, a disgruntled former employee of Noah's who had been fired for drinking on the job. Chen had been in the building that night, allegedly retrieving personal belongings. The case had never gone to trial. Chen had died in the fire, overcome by smoke while trying to escape. But not before Noah had carried Mrs. Chen, Marcus's elderly mother who lived in the apartment upstairs, to safety. The woman had survived, but Noah had been injured burns on his hands and arms, smoke inhalation that had left him hospitalized for 2 weeks. During his recovery, the insurance company had begun their investigation. Someone had leaked information suggesting that Noah might have set the fire himself for the insurance money. The accusation was baseless. Noah's policy barely covered his equipment, let alone provided motive for arson. But the suggestion was enough to poison the well of public opinion. Orders were canceled. Clients demanded refunds. Other craftsmen, fearing guilt by association, distanced themselves from Noah. His marriage to Sarah, already strained by financial pressures, and his physical recovery, couldn't survive the social ostracism. The most damaging detail was buried in a file from the insurance company's private investigator. Marcus Chen had been secretly working for Meridian Watch Company, feeding them information about Noah's client list and techniques. The fire had been intended to destroy evidence of industrial espionage, not to harm anyone. But Noah had never known this. He had spent 12 years believing that his former employee had died, trying to rob him, carrying the guilt of a man's death alongside the loss of everything else he had valued. Alara sat in her office at 2 a.m, surrounded by documents and police reports, trying to process what she had learned. Her father had tried to help Noah after the fire, offering him work and financial support. But Noah had been too broken, too proud, and too consumed by guilt to accept charity from his former mentor. The final piece of the puzzle came from her father's personal files, stored in a safe she had never opened. Among his papers, she found a folder labeled NB Restoration Fund, containing $25,000 in cash, and a letter dated just 2 weeks before her father's death. If you're reading this, the letter began in her father's careful handwriting. It means I didn't get the chance to make things right with Noah Blake. The money in this envelope represents commissions he earned but never collected, plus interest, plus my own attempt to repay a debt I've carried for 5 years. Noah Blake was the finest craftsman I ever trained, and I failed him when he needed me most. I knew about Marcus Chen's arrangement with Meridian. I had proof of the industrial espionage, proof that would have cleared Noah's name and restored his reputation. But I kept quiet to protect a business relationship that seemed more important at the time than one young man's future. I've regretted that decision every day since. If something happens to me before I can make amends, I'm trusting you to find a way to give Noah back what he lost, not just the money, but his place in this industry and his belief in his own worth. The letter was signed and dated, witnessed by her father's attorney. Legal proof of Noah's innocence and her father's guilt, a guilt he had carried to his grave. Alara called in sick for the first time in 5 years and spent the day walking through Central Park, trying to understand how a single decision could ripple through so many lives. Her father, whom she had idolized, had been human, after all, capable of moral failure and petty selfishness. Noah, whom she had seen as a victim of circumstance, had been the target of a deliberate conspiracy. And she, in her ignorance and arrogance, had perpetuated the injustice by treating him as invisible. That evening, she waited in the lobby until Noah arrived for his shift. When he saw her, his expression immediately became guarded. "Miss Whitmore? Has something happened? We need to talk." "Not in my office, somewhere private." "Please." They walked to a 24-hour diner 6 blocks away, sliding into a booth in the back corner where the fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows, and the coffee was strong enough to strip paint. Alara had never been in a place like this, but it felt appropriate for the conversation they needed to have. She laid the documents on the table between them. Police reports, insurance files, her father's letter, and the envelope of money. "I know what really happened," she said simply. Noah's face went white as he recognized the official letterheads and saw his own name typed across multiple pages. His hands trembled as he picked up her father's letter, reading it slowly, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and something that might have been relief. "He knew," Noah whispered,